Hello friends, my name is Chad and welcome to Chad in the Box, the only channel on YouTube where I lend you my 15 years of game store owner experience and we look at cool new miniatures, games, and hobby supplies so that you can better decide if they're worth your time, trouble, and hard-earned money. If that sounds interesting to you, then I would ask that you please subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. That way YouTube will let you know every time a new video is released. But with the preliminaries out of the way, let's jump right into the action here. We're going to be taking a look at Unmatched Jurassic Park, Dr. Sattler versus the T-Rex by Restoration Games and Mondo Games. And if that sounds a little one-sided, well, that's kind of the point of Unmatched. It's an asymmetrical fighting game, and as the slogan says on the back of the box, in battle there are no equals. So without further ado, let's jump right in and see what you get. Of course, the box here, you just unwrap it real quick. Of course, everything's going to come in cellophane. They've got some nice artwork on the front depicting the T-Rex, Sattler, and Malcolm, which are your two heroes, and Malcolm being the sidekick. Then we pop the lid off here, and I'm going to take a second and just talk a little bit about Unmatched as a series, because they have a number of great games in this series, and it is more like a series of games because the heroes can be swapped around. So you could take Dr. Sattler from this set, and you could play it against Little Red Riding Hood from another set, or you could take the T-Rex from this set and play it against King Arthur from a different set. They've got heroes of legend, they've got Sherlock Holmes, Dracula, Dr. Jekyll, Moon Knight, Ghost Rider, Bigfoot, Robin Hood, Medusa, Sinbad. The list goes on and on and on, and it's just a great assortment of characters from myth and legend, and they've also got some Marvel characters in there, and of course Sherlock Holmes, so you've got Sir Arthur Conan Doyle in there as well, and it's just really super cool that they have all of those options and they're interchangeable as you play. Then of course you get a rule book, which kind of gives you a rundown of Unmatched as a premise, but then also gives you the basic rules of the game. And the game is fairly simple and straightforward, but there's a lot of strategy and depth to it. You get some dials, which these do fit together quite nicely. I assembled all of mine and they turn very nice. And your insight tokens, so all your little punch 'em out tokens as you'd expect. Then you get a really cool fold-out board that is the T-Rex paddock on one side, which is probably one of the most iconic scenes from the movie. And then on the other side is a map of Isla Nublar, like a topographical map, which I don't really get. The Malcolm sidekick token and your little pegs to put the dials together. And then you get, of course, your 30-card action deck, which also has a couple of stat cards for your fighter, but the bulk of it is the 30-card action deck, which is how the game plays. That's what makes it an asymmetrical fighting game, is that each fighter gets its own deck of cards. There's no universal cards like you might see in Warhammer Underworlds, where a certain band may have their own specific cards, but could also put in cards that are from a universal deck or have no assignment. So the decks are set and they don't change. And while there may be cards that do similar things across different decks, there are no universal cards that you can just swap out. Dr. Sattler is set, T-Rex is set, Moon Knight is set, King Arthur is set. You play with that hero, you play with that deck. Now, of course, we're going to take a look at the most exciting thing, which are the miniatures. And Restoration Games, as you may have seen in my Return to Dark Tower video, puts out some beautiful looking miniatures. This T-Rex here is sculpted beautifully. It's got a very nice wash on it, which gives it a little layer of depth that most board game miniatures don't have. And Unmatched as a series tends to ride the line between board game and skirmish game, similar to Warhammer Underworlds again, in that while you don't play on a table of terrain, you play on a battle board in the same way. Now, there aren't two battle boards like in Warhammer Underworlds, there's just the one. And as I showed previously, in this set, there's only one side of the battle board. I think it would have been really cool to include the lobby from the end of the original Jurassic Park movie, where you showed the banner floating down. You know, maybe that could be across the floor where it says when dinosaurs ruled the earth. But they didn't do that here, and I'm not sure why. There's just one side, and I haven't opened any other copies of Unmatched, so I couldn't tell you if any of the other ones have double-sided battle boards. Now, the super cool thing here is when I ordered this game from Restoration, I got it as a bundle with this, the limited edition Dr. Ian Malcolm. Sexy open shirt Jeff Goldblum. Just sitting there all glistening with your pecs out. Hold me, Mr. Goldblum. You're so sexy. Anyways, so we're gonna paint up Jeff Goldblum. I mean, Dr. Ian Malcolm. I mean, Chesty McPecs. Okay, that's the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna paint Dr. Ian Malcolm. That's the reason I got the whole game is I saw that LE figure and I was like, yeah, I basically have to have this now. So we ordered it up. and we. There's only me. It's the royal we. We ordered this up. It was a very good game. Okay, never mind. That's nonsense. Let's jump right into painting Dr. Malcolm here. We start out by painting the shirt and the pants in Gravelord Gray, because I didn't want to go full black. Then we hit the hair. Don't forget the wristwatch, because he needs to know what time it is. Then we use camo cloak to paint his little blanket thing that he's laying on in his little sexy come and get me pose. So we go over that and camo cloak speed paint, which covers it, fairly nicely. All the speed paints really work quite well in this. Basically everything I have except one light tone wash and ash gray. Everything is all speed paints here. Then I come in with a little ash gray, speaking of which, and I touch up any place where I got the Gravelord Gray on the skin because I don't want them to be splotchy. Then I hit the whole skin, all of the skin with Crusader Skin speed paint, which made them a little darker than I wanted, but that was okay because I was gonna highlight the skin up anyways, which is what I did. Mix a little ash gray in with that Crusader Skin, and boom, you got a highlight, and it works out quite well. And you avoid that weird reactivation thing you can get with speed paints when you try to put a regular paint over them, because it's kind of using that speed paint medium in the mix. So we highlight those glistening, sexy pecs and his abdomen. And you don't have to be too detailed with this. He's a relatively small model. I'm not sure what the scale would be, but let's say it's a 20 millimeter model. If Flames of War is 15 mil and like 40K is, I don't know, 28 or 32 millimeter. Let's say this model's 20 or 22. But I went in and hit a little grim black in the shadows and then ash gray on the blanket, and then hit it with another layer of camo cloak, kind of speeding along here. Then I used ash gray again to paint the rags or the strips of cloth that are holding his splint on, touch up the watch a little bit, and then I repainted the rest of the base in ash gray so that I could cover everything up with a nice coating of grim black, which you just sort of dab it on there and a couple of coats and it looks beautiful. It's a nice solid smooth black that covers everything very nicely. And then because Dr. Sattler's base was pink or salmon or mauve fuchsia, I don't know, but her base ring is an odd color, so I decided to use International Rock Sensation Purple Alchemy to paint up Dr. Ian Malcolm's base rim. And with that, Dr. Ian Malcolm was basically done. I might go back in and touch up a few little things here and there, but I didn't want to get too crazy being that he was a board game model. So now that we've got him set aside and we had a lot of fun painting him, I jumped into just painting the other two models, and we started with Dr. Sattler. And Dr. Sattler is High Lord Blue for the undershirt, and then International Rock Sensation Purple Alchemy for the overshirt, and then I used a little light tone wash on the legs since Laura Dern, the actress who plays Dr. Sattler in the movie, is relatively fair skinned, so I didn't want to go too dark with that. But we got good coverage on the face and everything, and it did end up being a little darker than I really would have liked it to have been, but I figured I'd address that later. And we hit the hair with some Zealot Yellow, which is a beautiful color for blonde hair, and that's just one layer that you see there is all it is, just one layer of Zealot Yellow, and the hair was basically done. And then I moved on to Pallid Bone for the shorts. And then I used dark wood to paint her boots and all the little assorted pouches and bags and straps and stuff that she had around her waist. That worked quite well for that. And then I took that same dark wood and decided that I would put a shadow under the leg, which was a huge, stupid mistake. And as soon as I was done, I was like, oh, why did I do that? But it was too late, it was already done. And maybe I could have blended it out, but I just decided to fix it in the highlighting stage, which is where we are right now. We're gonna highlight the legs and the arms, and then once we get those done, we're gonna highlight the face a little bit. And since I only really had ash gray, Dr. Sattler didn't turn out as well as I would have liked her to be, simply because she ended up being too pale and kind of had a corpsey look going on. And I wasn't super jazzed about that, but there wasn't too much more I could do about it. So to finish the base, we covered the whole thing with Malignant Green, then hit the leaves with a combination of hardened leather, camo cloak, dark wood, and a little grim black. Then we snapped her onto her base, and Dr. Sattler was essentially done and ready to go toe-to-toe with the T-Rex, which, excitingly enough, is the next model we're going to paint and the one I was most looking forward to painting. So, without further ado, the T-Rex. I started by painting, I believe it was Crusader skin on the underbelly and under the neck, and the jaw, and all the way down to the tip of the tail. And that kind of seemed to give it a good earthy tone that I figured would work well. And then I put some camo cloak on top, starting at the crown of the head, and went around the mouth a little bit. And then I was able to blend it into the Crusader skin because speed paints take a little bit longer to dry, which in this case was a boon because it let me kind of wet blend the two colors together and get a nice transition. Then I put a little sand golem on the face, which gave it kind of a yellow tobacco-y color. And I really liked how that worked out. And it looks a little wonky right now, but I will tie it all together and it looks much better at the end. Then once I got everything the way I wanted it, as far as base colors go, I dry brushed the entire model, top to bottom. He got a dry brushing of ash gray. And I was pretty loose and quick with this. I didn't have any real plan. I just knew I wanted to highlight everything up a little bit more. And then I went over it with Army Painter Light Tone Wash, the whole thing. And I thought this would probably tie everything together. Then I did the tongue and the inside of the mouth with International Rock Sensation Purple Alchemy, which you might be saying, Chad, I don't understand that joke. That's a weird reference. And I would say then you should watch my Army Painter Speed Paint Mega Set unboxing because then the joke will make sense. I'll put a link in one of the corners wherever those go. But I also went over the teeth with Purple Alchemy because I wanted to then leave a little bit behind that could act as blood or gums or what have you when I painted them with ash gray. Feeling like there was just something missing, I decided I had to jump in and put some sort of pattern or something on the T-Rex. And I started by running a line from the crown of the head to the tip of the tail. And that didn't quite do it for me, so I decided he needs stripes. We gotta put some stripes on this guy. Every huge apex predator needs some sort of camouflage, and I thought this was good camouflage. And I couldn't remember if the T-Rex in the movie had stripes, but this T-Rex has stripes, and I like how it turned out. Once that was done, we jumped over to the base, and I just started smashing in some, it was dark wood and hardened leather and absolution green and a little grim black, and just sort of mixed it around with no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever, just to get it on the base. And I figured the way everything mixed together, it would kind of create a cohesive scheme, and it really did in the end. I really like how it turned out. We even threw a little Gravelord Gray in there just for good measure. Once that was done, I took some Grim Black and touched up the claws on the feet and the hands, these little teeny tiny baby hands. Then painted in them little nostril holes. And then I did a little stippling on the muzzle or top of the mouth head thing, whatever you want to call it, because I thought that needed it. And then jumped over to the teeth, which is just ash gray with a layer of Zealot yellow over the top. And then I touched them up with a little more ash gray as we went along. And then for some reason, I got it into my head that his eye sockets needed to have some Purple Alchemy in there just for a splash of color. I don't know what I was doing. I wouldn't recommend doing this. Maybe a different method would have worked better, but I just took it as it was and I slapped some Grim Black on the base rim, and the T-Rex was ready for some battle. And with that, we're done. We now have a fully painted and based Unmatched Jurassic Park Dr. Sattler versus the T-Rex. And here's what it looks like. It looks beautiful. Every game with fully painted models looks beautiful, even if it's not a great paint job. Really, everything's gonna be at arm's length, which covers a lot of sins on the painting side of things, but the game looks beautiful. It was already a cool looking game just with restoration and Mondo's washed miniatures, but this really takes it to a whole other level, and I look forward to really playing this game with a couple of my buddies. Now you could paint this up very easily yourself. It didn't take a lot of colors. I used almost all speed paints, and you really don't have to highlight. The way speed paints work, you could just jump right in, one coat everything, and be done. That was the intention I started out with. I did not intend to paint Dr. Sattler or the T-Rex at all. I was just planning to paint sexy open shirt Jeff Goldblum. That's the reason I got the game, is I thought that was an awesomely hilarious model and I had to paint it. But once I painted it, I had so much fun with it, I decided I just had to do the other two and get the whole set done. Now that created its own challenges because, for one, while I have painted quite a few models over the years, as I'll show you here, it has been several years since I've actually painted anything, and I've never filmed myself painting, which added a whole nother level of logistics that I didn't even take into consideration. And this video itself was a monster to edit and get put up. That's why it's been weeks since I've put anything out, because I've messed up this part of me just talking to you through the process 5 times, either audio issues, video issues. One time I got the video all the way done and was ready to upload, and then when I watched the final preview in high definition, the gray background I had was doing like weird flex. Looks like the time was warping around me. I thought somebody's gonna open a wormhole in the background. So here we are, we're doing it again because I want it to be as good as I can get for you guys, because I appreciate you spending your time with me. But of course, all that being said, I've learned a lot making this video, which I didn't like learning when I was messing everything up, but I'm grateful for the knowledge now. And I'm glad you got to see the first models I've ever painted in 2 or 3 years and the first models I've ever filmed being painted. So that was a lot of fun in the long term. Now, from a gamer's perspective, I think Unmatched is a win-win across the board. There's a lot of different options. Almost all of them come with game boards, and you can swap out the boards and have different battles with different heroes and change everything out, as I've mentioned. And it's a really low entry point. 20 to 40 bucks usually gets you going, and I think everything except the Bruce Lee expansion comes with either a single-sided board or a double-sided board. Why Jurassic Park Dr. Sattler versus the T-Rex was a single-sided board, I do not know. But maybe there's licensing or something involved, and I know that can always complicate the situation. Now, from a game store owner's perspective, you might be finagling a little bit to try and get all the games in, because when I checked the 3 main distributors that I used to use, none of them had all of them. So you might have to mix and match and try and get from 2 distributors to get everything. The first one I checked was ACD, and they show 9 out of what I think are 12 different versions of Unmatched, and they only had 1 of them in stock. So ACD is probably not going to be the way to go. Now, they may be getting a restock of Restoration games in, I'm not sure. And the reason they're not showing the other ones could be licensing. I did notice that on the Alliance page that everything that was Marvel was from Mondo, and everything that was not Marvel was from Restoration. So maybe there's some licensing or distribution agreements at play that are affecting ACD's ability to get the Marvel-themed ones. But Alliance did have a listing for all 12 versions, but they only had 8 of them in stock, which is pretty good. You know, you got 3/4 of them, that's a good start. And PhD was the same way. They showed all of them, plus a demo game, which I've grayed out here, but they also only had 8 in stock. Now, I looked into it a little bit closer and did a stock comparison, and it looks like out of the 12 games, there's only 3 that you can't fulfill from any warehouse, and that's InGen versus the Raptors, Deadpool, and Bruce Lee. Everything else you could get, even though 1 of them, 2 of them, you got to finagle a little bit between PhD and Alliance. And there may be other distributors that are carrying it that have full stock. I don't know. Those are the 3 that I use. But overall, I think it's still worth having. I was a big fan of Descent 2nd Edition, which I know doesn't have anything to do with Unmatched. But I like carrying like blocks of a thing, and I'm a completionist, so I want to have all of it. So when Descent 2nd Edition was the only version of Descent that was really out, and they had a lot of Lieutenant and monster expansions and stuff like that, I wanted to carry everything in a big block and just make a starter section, because I felt like that was a good entryway for people that were board gamers and maybe wanted to dabble with role-playing, was to kind of get them into Descent, let them try that, and then they could leap from there. Wouldn't be quite as far. That's a weird analogy, but that's what you get, is the leap from there wouldn't be quite as far. And I would want to do the same thing with Unmatched, is I would get multiple copies of everything they have and just build a little block. You could maybe even put it right next to Warhammer Underworlds if you carry that game, because perhaps the same kind of people like it. Now, if they're just hardcore Games Workshop guys, they're probably not going to make the leap. But if they just want a small, manageable skirmish game, then Unmatched is a great way to go, with 2 to 4 models in most sets. All things considered, I think Unmatched is a great system. I wouldn't hesitate buying it as a gamer, and I fully intend to get a lot of the other expansions. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, so I think Cobble and Fog is going to be very soon in my future. But I also think as a game store owner, the game is well worth carrying it. It's just a cool game that appeals to a broad range of customers. But with that, I want to thank you for taking your valuable time and sharing it with me. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share it with your friends. That's a great help to the channel. And in the meantime, have a fantastic day, and I will catch you on the next episode.